All right, thank you all for coming, folks. We have our next talk from Jeremy Garcia, who is you're the head of open source at Datadog, yeah?
I am.
Excellent. He's the head of open source at Datadog, and he is talking to us about a new open source project that helps your project to track metrics beyond just code. So thank you for being here, Jeremy.
Thank you. So as you said, welcome to your open source community metrics should be tracking more than code. Just out of curiosity here, how many people are either maintainers or responsible for an open source repository? Oh, so good amount. Awesome. So what I'm going to do is give a brief presentation, give a quick demo, and then I'll leave questions. Probably have time before and after the demo, but if you have a burning question during, feel free to raise your hand and ask. So who am I and why should you even consider listening to me? So I'm a community ambassador for opensource.com. I'm a co-presenter in a podcast called Bad Voltage, for those familiar with that. I'm the founder of linuxquestions.org, which is the largest non-company community, Linux community on the web. And as Sheen said, I am the lead of the open source team at Datadog. So, metrics. I talk with folks about metrics and communities and open source a lot. Realistically, probably more than it helps, but it's something that I really, really enjoy. So if I put a statement like this up here, using metrics to make data-driven decisions improves your ability to build sustainable open source communities, I don't exactly think this is a controversial statement. I think data-driven decisions just produce better results, and that's something that most people would agree on. So if you have an open source community, you know what metrics are, you should just jump right in and say, well, what do I want to measure? And I think that's what most people do. I think it's the wrong approach. What you really want to do is figure out what you want to accomplish so you know what metrics you actually need. So what you should be asking yourself are things like, what outcomes am I looking for? What specific questions do I want these metrics to answer? And really, what are my end goals here so that you can then get actionable information that will help you answer those questions and actually make some changes, which is, in the end, what you really want. You don't want metrics for the sake of metrics. You want metrics to make things better. So, as I said, as the open source lead at Datadog, I'm responsible for the repositories there. So what kind of questions do I want to answer? So I want to be able to better understand how responsive we're being to our community, right? And that means I want to explicitly know with data. I don't want gut feeling. I don't want anesthesia. I don't want to feel like, it seems like we're doing fine. I want, data. And I want to know how, not just how the repositories are doing from how quickly are things being merged, but how quickly are we merging community contributions. If I have employees that are not able to get their code merged, that's a different problem with a different solution than if I have community members who can't get their code merged. And I want to better quantify the value that our community provides. And I want to be super clear here. It's not because I want to put a number on the community. I'm not stack ranking community members. It's nothing of that nature. What I really want to do, though, is kind of prove the value so that I can do things like fly a good contributor out to a summit or send a bunch of people shirts or do things like that. Or if you have a company contributing a lot of code and you have a new feature coming out, maybe you want to have them part of the discussion while you're building it and give them private beta access and things like that. And having real numbers to be able to facilitate that kind of thing makes you able to argue up the chain that it's worthwhile. I want to kind of understand, and then also raise your hand here if you work at a technology company and you have extra engineering resources. Right? I should note here, Datadog is hiring. My team has a bunch of positions open. Across the org, we have hundreds of positions open. I should be asking you where you work and seeing if that can work for you, because no one has extra engineering resources, right? So with the limited engineering resources that I have on my team, I want to be able to know where I can focus that energy to get the most bang for the buck. I want to be able to track interactions. My memory, not very good. So I want to be able to say, like, I ran into CAD at FOSDEM, or this contributor's having a problem. And, so that way you can kind of build patterns and see where you should focus that energy again. And I want to better understand the community at a personal level. A good friend of mine, John O'Bacon, is not here, but he once said, everything in life starts with people. And I really believe that. And I think we need to focus more on people, on relationships. Because in the end, code's great, but that code's created by people, and you should kind of focus on that. And I'm going to tell a couple stories that I think are illustrative of this. So let's say you have a long-time contributor, contributing at a very consistent rate over a pretty long period of time, and he suddenly disappears. I want a tool that lets me know that so I can reach out. Maybe he just had a child and I should send him a Datadog onesie. Or maybe he's having a problem with the product and I want to know that so I can help him. Or maybe he's having a personal issue and he's been a great contributor and maybe I can help him with that. Or maybe you have a contributor, she's worked at company X, used your product, she moves on to company Y, once again used your product, great contributor, and now you know she's moving on to company Z. You want to reach out and say, is company Z using our product? If they are, how can I enable that contributor to succeed there? And if they're not, how can I enable her to maybe get that product into the organization? Or a third thing, unlike the first story where it was one contributor that stopped contributing, let's say you have a large organization and dozens of people are very regularly contributing to your product or project. If all of them stop contributing at the same time, you probably have a problem on your hands, and it's something you're going to want to look into before you lose that customer. There's a couple other things to keep in mind here. Understand this thing, it's always going to change, right? As you get more data, you're going to want more data, and things are going to just evolve, and you need a tool that's flexible and will evolve with you. And there's going to be different by community. What's right for me is not going to be what's right for you. Every community is different, and really embracing that and understanding that is really, really important. And you should really understand whether you're running a project or a product. They're two very different things, but I think flexible tooling should be able to address both of those. And it's also really, really important, and I think undervalued, to understand what you don't want to track. Be very careful what you incentivize, because the law of unintended consequences will get you. So with those kind of requirements in mind, I set out looking for some open source projects. I'm an open source person that never wants to build something new if I don't have to. There's a ton of great software out there. So the first thing I did is kind of look to see what there was, to see if maybe I could build on top of it, or if something existed that did exactly what I wanted, which would have been great. So here's kind of a list of the current options in the space. For those of you not familiar with Grimoire from Bitergia, absolutely awesome product, absolutely awesome project, awesome team, awesome company. For many of you, that's honestly going to be the right answer. It does pretty much everything. It pulls things in from CI/CD, from Git, from GitHub, from anything you're using, from bug trackers to forums to mailing lists. It's going to pull that data in. It does really great analytics. It's got a little bit of a steep learning curve, and because of the products that it's built on top of, it was kind of difficult for me to extend it in the way that I wanted, so that's why we didn't use that as a base. OSS Dashboard from Amazon is actually really good, but the way it runs in phases, I also didn't think it was appropriate to build on. OSS Tracker from Netflix was kind of the most encouraging from the beginning, because I think philosophically it was the closest to what I wanted. Unfortunately, I couldn't even get it to run after quite a bit of trying. It was written in Scala, which I don't know, so it just didn't seem like a good base because of those reasons. Gander from PayPal, also really awesome. Used to use it previously. It's languishing a little bit now and is not as maintained as it used to be, so it didn't seem like a good base because of that reason. And there's a bunch of others, but like I said, none of them are really extensible in the way that I wanted to go. So I was, as I said, I talk about community analytics a lot. I was talking to this gentleman, for those of you who don't know him, Stuart Langridge. He's not able to be here today, but he is watching the live stream, so everyone say hi to Stu. So we were going back and forth, and the idea kind of coalesced, and one day in the pub he said, haha, I can build this. And he started. So what we have is something called Measure. I don't love the name. It turns out naming things really is hard. So if you have any better ideas, certainly open to changing the name. But I'm happy to announce we tagged version 0.01 yesterday, and what that really means is it's going to be pretty stable, reasonably easy to install, and mostly work as expected. It's definitely still beta quality software. It does seem to work. It does need some work. The documentation especially needs some work. The install needs to get a little bit better. All things we're aiming for version 0.2. And things are going to involve, so I want feedback on the idea, the implementation, pretty much everything. I'd love to get your feedback on it. But at its core, for lack of a better term, and I don't love the term, it's a contributor relationship management system. It's really metrics that focus on not just the code, although it does focus a lot on code, but also the contributors. Basically, what I want to understand is how people as individuals and people as organizations are interacting with my project. I'd also like to take a brief second to thank the Linux Fund who made 0.1 of this possible. And note, I abstained for voting on this one, but I am on the board of the Linux Fund. So if you have an open source project that you think needs funding, feel free to track me down and let's chat. So a few quick product philosophies here. It should be simple. We're willing to trade, to be frank, some flexibility for simplicity. We want this to be really easy, very little learning curve. We want you to be able to kind of install it, jump in, and get right into it. It should look good. And I think this is sometimes undervalued in the open source community, although recently this seems to be changing, which is really awesome. It should be pretty opinionated out of the box, but should be really extensible. Like I said, what's right for my community is not going to be what's right for your community. So if you don't like the decisions I've made, you should be able to very easily change them. As I mentioned before, I think your employees not being able to get their code merged is a way different problem with way different solutions than your community not being able to get code merged. So it should very explicitly and easily be able to separate them out differently, but also aggregate them, obviously, because you want to know your overall health. And it should treat the people as first-class citizens. Like the concept of a contributor should be baked into the product at a very fundamental level. Just a few implementation details. Of course, 100% open source. We want the Apache 2 license. It actually uses GH crawler from Microsoft, which is, we found a few bugs in there, submitted them upstream. Microsoft was surprisingly receptive and merged them actually quicker than I would have anticipated, to be honest. So I thought that was interesting. We've also contributed to a couple other upstream projects, Charts.js and stuff, for example. So it takes the concept of a widget and reports, and then it builds those into dashboards. It's written in Node, and there's the GitHub URL for those that want to check it out. Like I said, I tagged we'll call it the first pre-release yesterday. So here is a quick screenshot. Like I said, I am going to do a demo. But we kind of took the Unix philosophy here. Every widget does one thing only, does it really well, and you can kind of pipe them together to do pretty much anything that you want. Like I said, we wanted it to look good, so I really want to thank Michael as well as a friend of Stuart. He did the design work on this. I think he did a really good job. And I'll kind of walk you through some of the widgets and things during the demo. But if you don't have any questions, or anyone has any questions, I'll get into the demo. And questions? No. This resolution on this thing is not what I thought it would be, so this should be interesting. I can't even see that either. So here's the overview. This is going to be every repo that you have in the system, right, is an aggregated view of this. So it's going to get, one of the widget types is just data, one of the widget types is going to be line graphs, one is going to be stack charts, things like that. So you're going to get a very quick overview of how the code is progressing, things like open issues, things like new contributors, old contributors, contributors that are not in an organization. And then you can also drill down by repository and get that same information. So this is just a fictitious kind of setup for this. So if you go into Mongo, you can see, where your open issues are, open PRs, which contributors are leaving, which contributors are coming is on the bottom here. So you can say, here's a list of new people contributing to the project. Here's people that are leaving. Yes?
The title of the talk is Your Open Source Metrics Should Be Tracking More Than Code.
Yeah.
These metrics all seem code related.
So there's a bunch that are contributor related. There's an entire contributor panel. There's an organizational panel as well.
The metrics come from looking at the code, but they're not metrics about code. They come from looking at the process of making code.
So they come with the process of making code, but the concept of kind of the notes and the when's the last time this person left, when's the last time this person came, things like velocity, at a contributor level, velocity changes, things of that nature are where it comes into focus with people. So I want to be notified, like I said, when people that are regular contributors, when they leave, or when their velocity of contribution changes. So that's where I think you need to focus on the people, and that's something that this tool enables you to do that I don't think the other tools do. The other tool is really the contributor is just they checked in this much code kind of thing, where this, if you look at so if you go into an organization, it'll list the people that are in that organization, and you can click on them individually and see what they've done. Like I said, you can add notes. So ran into them at FOSDEM, had a problem on this date. The notes right now aren't structured because we're still building that out, but once they're structured, you'll be able to do alerting and things of that nature. Or you'll be able to put a note for a future date saying, saw this contributor will be at FOSDEM, remind me the day before, kind of thing. So that's where I think the focus on people is going to come in. So here's the contributor dashboard. So you can see how many open PRs they have, open issues, a bunch of data about them, the rate at which their PRs are being accepted or rejected, things like that. And then you can also do, so the concept of teams is you're going to have a bunch of repos, obviously, but you might have one team responsible for 6. That just aggregates it by those. So those are arbitrarily defined user definitions. And then reports are, you might have like an engineering lead who doesn't want to go into this tool and get certain numbers or look at graphs. They want one very specific data point. Reports allow you to build that one thing, and you can have it email it to them, or just give them the URL either way. But it's just that specific data, so you don't have to. So if you want response time by repository, for example, it's just that data with nothing else there. So that's a demo. I'm happy to take questions from there.
Yeah, you showed the concept of repository, the concept of organization, and the concept of teams. Sometimes you have things you Android that have perhaps some UI or whatever, but you know that people in the teams were cross-repository,
Mhm.
and sometimes there is overlap between them. So perhaps it would be interesting to have another category to have this crossover to show them.
So a repository can be part of multiple teams, and a person can be on multiple teams.
Yeah.
So, and then we're building out sub-teams as well, but that's not in there in point one. Yep.
Really cool. Is there a way to get the data behind each widgets, whether it's on a per widget basis or like an API or something like that?
So the data right now is all in GH crawler, which is basically a MongoDB store of all of the, so it has like a one collection for issues, one collection for PRs. So you can also query against Mongo directly if you'd like, but the widgets query against Mongo now.
Grimoire has the ability to like download the CSV of the chart you're looking at, right then and there in the dashboard. That would be a really cool feature to kind of building reports out of the dashboard.
So no, we don't do that, but that is a good idea. Thanks.
So, a pair of questions. One of them, how does it handle an organization that has a bunch of different businesses? Like Microsoft has 30 or does it track across all work, or is it really just about
So the inside-outside org right now is not a GitHub definition, it's what you define it as. So the one downside that I would say of the tool, and I don't know a way to fix this, and I'm happy to hear of answers to this, but people use GitHub orgs in way different ways. So we didn't want to base it on GitHub orgs. So now you actually place people in orgs manually. There's an API to do it programmatically. But so you would say they're in the Microsoft org, and they can be in sub-orgs and multiple orgs. And they can leave and come and go from orgs. Obviously, sometimes the contributor is going to become an employee. You want to track those two time frames separately, which the tool currently does. So you would put them in those different orgs. You can right now only have one in org, though. We should.
dig into work offline?
Okay.
The second one is, how do you handle differentiation between, or identify people who are contributing to the project that are employees? Do you track that they're just members of the board?
Yes. So one thing I should have showed, so if you do go into a repository, this is right here is where it is inside and outside the org. So you can see, everything's going to change based on that. Yeah.
Are you thinking to start tracking or monitoring other activities than code, especially focused on contribution, in terms of relations between contributors, having office hours, and the participation of these people in office hours, and any different activities than code contribution?
So the way the structured notes will be built out, something like office hours would be appropriate for a note. We eventually will track more than just code, certainly, though. Things like mailing lists. And it will never, to be frank, track all the things Patergia tracks, because I don't think they're going to ever be competitive tools. But realizing that code is not just the only way to contribute, so we will pull in other things, probably after version 1, though. We want to get this experience correct first, and then build out other data points for that. Anyone else?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
No worries. Actually, it's an interesting idea, right? I'd like to know if you thought about extending it to not only GitHub, but getting other sources like wikis. Because people in the project are also participating in writing documentation, writing FAQs, whatever,
Yeah.
or even writing policies, writing whatever you could think about what you need for running your project or your open source software development or whatever.
Sure.
Is there a plan to integrate other sources like this too?
Yeah, so for version 0.1, we went with just GitHub. Version 0.2 will probably be other, like GitLab and maybe Bitbucket or something. But after version 1, we would definitely want to take wikis, mailing lists, Slack, things like that. Any kind of participation point that we can get and pull it in. Absolutely, yes.
Because to get the whole community inside, you need to
Yes.
expand it over just the coding
Absolutely.
platform.
Right. And that's where it's really about people. If you have someone that's really awesome in Slack but doesn't contribute code, that's still an awesome contributor. We want to know about that.
That's okay.
Yeah.
Are you targeting in the future some documentation to
were like enthusiasts of the solar industry, like automation of batches or reminders?
So reminders are going to be in the next version, yes. There's an API. Most of the things you can do in the UI you can already do through the API. So you can write automated tooling from there. We haven't written any yet, though.
I think you mentioned gamification.
He was asking if there'll be gamification built into the platform. Probably not. Because I believe you have to be careful what you incentivize, I would be reticent to do that. If there's a way that does it in a way I'm happy with, I'd be open to it. But my gut would be probably not.
Is this something that just the project moderator would work with, not the individual contributors? So the contributors don't see this, so it's just for the owner of the project.
So I would imagine that some projects will absolutely make this data open to their community. I would imagine that some companies would not. We also, right now, the authentication model is one of three things. It can be completely authenticated, which means anyone can view and anyone can add nodes, can change orgs. We have an authentication model that everyone can see, but you need to log in to edit, and then an authentication model where you have to log in to see anything. So we kept it pretty simple for now, but those are the three kind of models.
Another question, is this a project or is it for a product?
Project, very much. Deliberately.
Does Datadog sponsor you working on this as part of your work plan, or is this all in your?
So this was something that the company wanted to have for their repository, so they don't sponsor the project in any way. They do allow, as I said, we allow our engineers to do cool things. So I have to be over time, right? I don't want to.
No, you're not. Actually,
Oh.
you still have 3 minutes, and
Oh.
then we have a 5-minute transition for community karaoke,
Awesome.
which will be me standing at the front of the room embarrassing myself until other people want to too.
Sorry, thanks.
Could AI help to like more like data user?
So on the roadmap is that he asked about AI impacting the tool. Things like sentiment analysis are definitely part of the plan. I think there's some very cool machine learning things that would enable us to make more actionable data, which is something we want. So definitely yes. If you want to contribute that. Anything else?
Thank you, Jeremy.
Oh,
Wait.
Under the wire.
buzzer beater.
So you say it's passing the test, you pass the test on the
So right now it doesn't. We'll have to add that to GH crawler upstream. But yeah, happy to do that. It should obviously support more than GitHub in the end. Yes.
I see the talk in the afternoon analyzing developers' networks in a community. Is it somehow related to your project?
No. Thanks.